Why do the worst always seem to win? This is a question that has haunted humanity for centuries. We witness the liars, manipulators, and opportunists rise, while those who cling to integrity and fairness often falter. It feels like a cruel irony, as if the very traits that should lead to success become obstacles in a world that rewards cunning and ruthlessness. Philosophers such as Nietzsche and Machiavelli understood this dynamic better than most, and their insights into power, morality, and human behavior remain disturbingly relevant today. To understand why the worst win, we must consider the rules of the game they are playing and the systems they exploit. Nietzsche, for example, saw life as a relentless struggle for power. He rejected the notion of inherent fairness or justice in the universe, arguing that such concepts are human inventions designed to comfort the weak and justify their suffering. For Nietzsche, power is not inherently good or evil, it simply is. Those who understand and embrace this truth are more likely to succeed because they are not constrained by the illusions of morality or fairness. They see the world as it is, a chaotic and indifferent place where strength, cunning, and adaptability are the keys to survival. Machiavelli, on the other hand, approached power from a more pragmatic perspective. In his infamous work, The Prince, he argued that a ruler must be willing to do whatever it takes to maintain control, even if it means lying, cheating, or using violence. He believed that morality is often a luxury that leaders cannot afford, especially in a world where appearances matter more than reality.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
A successful ruler, according to Machiavelli, must learn how to be both a lion and a fox. Strong enough to crush enemies but cunning enough to avoid their traps. This duality is crucial to understanding why the worst often win. They are not bound by the constraints of honesty or kindness, which can be exploited by others. Instead, they use these constraints to their advantage, manipulating those who still cling to them. At the same time, they project an image of virtue and competence, knowing that perception is often more important than truth. This creates a paradox. The very traits that society claims to value, integrity, compassion, fairness, are the ones that make individuals vulnerable in a world that rewards deception and self-interest. The systems we have built often reinforce this dynamic. Institutions, whether political, economic, or social, are designed to reward results, not intentions. A politician who lies their way to the top is often celebrated for their success, while an honest one who fails is quickly forgotten. A business leader who cuts corners and exploits workers may be condemned in public, but their profits and growth are still rewarded. This creates a perverse incentive structure, where the worst behaviors are not only tolerated but incentivized. To survive in such a system, individuals must either compromise their values or risk being left behind. But does this mean that morality is a weakness? Nietzsche would argue that traditional morality, what he called the slave morality of the masses, is indeed a weakness, because it is designed to suppress the will to power and keep individuals subservient to the status quo. However, he also believed in the possibility of creating one's own values, transcending the simplistic dichotomy of good and evil. This requires a kind of inner strength and self-mastery that goes beyond the shallow strategies of those who play dirty. True power, for Nietzsche, is not about manipulation or deceit. It is about the ability to shape one's own destiny and rise above the petty struggles of the world. Machiavelli, while less idealistic, also recognized the limitations of purely selfish behavior. He warned that a ruler who relies solely on fear and deception will eventually lose the trust and loyalty of their subjects. To achieve lasting success, a leader must balance ruthlessness with wisdom, ensuring that their actions serve a greater purpose. This raises an important question. Is it possible to succeed in a world that rewards the worst traits without becoming one of the worst ourselves? The answer lies in understanding the nature of power and the strategies used by those who wield it. Power is not just about domination or control, it is about influence and the ability to shape the world according to one's vision. While the worst may win in the short term through manipulation and deceit, their victories are often hollow and unsustainable. They may gain power, but they rarely gain respect or loyalty. Their success is built on a foundation of lies which can crumble at any moment. Those who seek true power must go beyond the superficial tactics of the worst. They must learn to navigate the complexities of human behavior, understanding when to compromise and when to stand firm. This requires a deep awareness of one's own values and priorities, as well as the ability to adapt to changing circumstances without losing sight of the bigger picture. It also requires building alliances with others who share similar goals and values, creating a network of support that can withstand the challenges of a competitive and often ruthless world. While the worst may appear to win, their victories are often short-lived and come at a great cost. They may achieve power, but they lose their humanity in the process. True success requires a different kind of strength, one that is rooted in self-awareness, resilience, and the ability to inspire others. It is not about playing the game better than others, it is about rewriting the rules and creating a new game altogether. Nietzsche, Machiavelli, and other great thinkers understood that the world is not a fair or just place. But they also believed in the possibility of transcending its limitations, of rising above the petty struggles of the worst and achieving something greater. This is not an easy path, but it is the only one that leads to true and lasting success. The worst may win in the short term, but their victories are hollow and unsustainable. Those who seek true power must go beyond the superficial tactics of the worst, learning to navigate the complexities of human behavior and build a foundation of strength, resilience, and integrity. The question then becomes whether the worst always win because they are inherently better at playing the game of power, or because the systems we inhabit are structured to reward their behavior. Power is rarely neutral. It exists within frameworks designed by human beings, and those frameworks are often built to favor certain traits over others. Look at history. Empires, political systems, and economic structures have often been dominated by individuals who were willing to exploit the rules or bend them to their advantage. These systems, rather than punishing such behavior, often reward it because the outcomes align with what those in control value most: efficiency, wealth, control, or expansion. The traits we consider virtuous, honesty, compassion, fairness, are often seen as weaknesses in competitive environments because they appear to slow down decision-making or undermine the pursuit of maximum gain. The worst thrive because they are unbound by these limitations. They are willing to do what others will not, and in doing so they gain an edge. This raises the issue of whether the systems themselves are broken or whether they reflect an uncomfortable truth about human nature. Nietzsche would argue that the systems are not broken, but rather manifestations of the will to power. In his view, every society is a battleground where competing wills struggle for dominance. Those who succeed are not necessarily the strongest or the most intelligent, but those who best understand the dynamics of power and adapt to them. The worst, in this sense, are simply the most effective players in a game that has no inherent moral dimension. They win because they refuse to be constrained by illusions of fairness or virtue. Machiavelli, too, recognized that morality is often a tool used by the powerful to maintain their position. Leaders who speak of justice and fairness may do so not because they believe in these ideals, but because they understand that appearing virtuous is a means of consolidating power. The worst excel at this because they understand that perception is often more important than reality. They manipulate appearances, presenting themselves as ethical and competent while acting in ways that are anything but. This creates a feedback loop in which their success reinforces the idea that such behavior is necessary to win. The more they succeed, the more others are tempted to emulate their tactics, perpetuating a cycle in which the worst continue to rise. However, this view is not universally accepted. There is an argument to be made that while the worst may win in the short term, their victories are ultimately unsustainable. History is filled with examples of leaders and systems that collapsed under the weight of their own corruption and deceit. The Roman Empire, for instance, thrived on conquest and exploitation, but eventually fell because it could not sustain the internal divisions and moral decay that its methods created. Similarly, corporations that prioritize profit over ethics may achieve short-term success, but often face long-term consequences in the form of scandals, lawsuits, or consumer backlash. This suggests that while the worst may win in certain contexts, their dominance is neither inevitable nor permanent. There is also the question of whether those who succeed by playing dirty truly win in a meaningful sense. Nietzsche would argue that true power is not about domination or control over others, but about mastery of oneself. The worst may achieve external success, but their victories are hollow if they come at the expense of their integrity or humanity. They may gain wealth, status, or influence, but they are often consumed by paranoia, isolation, and a constant fear of losing what they have gained. This is not true power, it is a fragile and fleeting imitation. Machiavelli, too, understood the limitations of purely selfish behavior. While he advocated for pragmatism and adaptability, he also warned that a ruler who relies solely on fear and manipulation risks alienating their subjects and creating instability. A wise leader, in his view, balances ruthlessness with wisdom, ensuring that their actions serve a greater purpose. This balance is key to achieving lasting success, as it allows a leader to maintain both power and legitimacy. The challenge then is to navigate a world that often rewards the worst without becoming one of them. This requires a deep understanding of the dynamics of power and a willingness to engage with them on one's own terms. It means recognizing that success is not just about winning at any cost, but about achieving outcomes that align with one's values and goals. This is not an easy task, as it requires constant self-awareness and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances without compromising one's principles. It also requires building alliances with others who share similar values, as collective action is often more effective than individual effort. While the worst may appear to have the upper hand, they are not invincible. Their victories are often based on short-term strategies that leave them vulnerable to long-term consequences. Those who play the game with integrity and intelligence may not win as quickly or as easily, but their success is more likely to endure. They build foundations of trust, respect, and loyalty that are not easily shaken. They create systems and structures that reflect their values, shaping the world in ways that are more sustainable and just. This does not mean that they are immune to failure or betrayal, but it does mean that their victories are more meaningful and fulfilling. It is important to recognize that the dynamics of power are not fixed. They are shaped by the choices and actions of individuals and groups. While the worst may dominate in certain contexts, their influence can be challenged and overturned by those who are willing to think strategically and act decisively. This requires courage, resilience, and a willingness to take risks, but it also offers the possibility of creating a world that rewards the best in us rather than the worst. Nietzsche and Machiavelli both understood that power is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon. It is not simply a matter of brute strength or cunning, but also of vision, strategy, and the ability to inspire others. The worst may excel at certain aspects of power, but they often lack the depth and foresight needed to achieve true greatness. Their victories are shallow and short-lived, leaving them vulnerable to those who possess a more nuanced understanding of what it means to succeed. The question of why the worst always win is ultimately a reflection of the systems and values we choose to uphold. If we reward deception and selfishness, we should not be surprised when these traits dominate. But if we create systems that value integrity, collaboration, and long-term thinking, we can shift the balance of power in a more positive direction. This requires not only individual effort but also collective action, as the structures that enable the worst to win are often deeply entrenched and resistant to change. However, history shows that change is possible. Movements for justice, equality, and human rights have challenged and overturned oppressive systems, demonstrating that the worst do not always have to win. These movements are often led by individuals who refuse to compromise their values, even in the face of immense obstacles. They understand that true power is not about dominating others, but about creating a world in which everyone has the opportunity to thrive. This is not an easy path, but it is one that offers the possibility of lasting and meaningful success. The worst may win in the short term, but their victories are ultimately unsustainable. True power lies in the ability to shape the world in ways that reflect our highest aspirations rather than our basest instincts. By understanding the dynamics of power and acting with integrity and intelligence, we can challenge the dominance of the worst and create a world that rewards the best in us. The cycle of rewarding the worst in human behavior is deeply embedded in the structures we live under, but it is not inevitable. Social hierarchies, cultural norms, and institutional frameworks have created environments that often favor those willing to exploit others. But these systems are malleable and subject to change. The worst excel because they exploit weaknesses in these systems, but these weaknesses are not permanent. They are merely the result of historical, economic, and social conditions that have converged to create the world as it is today. However, understanding the mechanisms that allow the worst to thrive is the first step in dismantling their grip on power. One of the most significant factors is the way authority is perceived and legitimized. Those who rise to power often manipulate perception, creating an illusion of competence, strength, or morality that does not align with their actions. This is a tactic as old as civilization itself. Machiavelli understood this well when he wrote that it is more important for a leader to seem virtuous than to actually be virtuous. The appearance of morality pacifies the masses and disarms opposition, allowing those in power to act in ways that would otherwise provoke outrage. The worst capitalize on this by mastering the art of presentation. They know how to craft narratives that serve their interests, controlling the flow of information and shaping public opinion to suit their needs. This is particularly evident in modern politics and media, where spin doctors and public relations experts work tirelessly to maintain the facade of legitimacy for their clients. The rise of social media has only amplified this phenomenon, creating a landscape where perception often outweighs substance, and those who can manipulate the narrative gain an almost insurmountable advantage. But perception alone is not enough to secure power. The worst also understand the importance of dividing their opposition. Divide and conquer strategies are a hallmark of authoritarian regimes and corrupt leaders because they prevent unified resistance. By sowing discord among their rivals, they create an environment where opposition becomes fragmented and ineffective. This tactic works because it exploits one of humanity's most fundamental weaknesses, the tendency to focus on differences rather than commonalities. In a divided society, individuals are more likely to fight among themselves than to challenge those in power, allowing the worst to maintain their dominance with minimal effort. Another key factor is the use of fear as a tool of control. Fear is one of the most powerful motivators in human behavior, and those who seek power understand how to weaponize it. By creating a sense of danger or instability, they position themselves as the solution to the very problems they have often helped create. This allows them to justify actions that would otherwise be unacceptable, such as restricting freedoms, consolidating authority, or scapegoating vulnerable groups. Fear not only suppresses dissent but also creates a sense of dependency, as people are more likely to tolerate abuses of power if they believe those abuses are necessary to ensure their safety. While these tactics may seem insurmountable, they also reveal the vulnerabilities of those who rely on them. The worst often rule through manipulation, fear, and division because they lack the genuine support or legitimacy needed to govern effectively. Their power is inherently fragile, dependent on maintaining the illusion of control and the compliance of those they oppress. This means that their dominance can be challenged, but doing so requires a deep understanding of the dynamics at play and a willingness to engage with them strategically. One of the most effective ways to challenge the worst is by building solidarity among those who oppose them. This requires overcoming the divisions that are so often exploited by those in power, focusing on shared goals and values rather than differences. Solidarity is a powerful force because it creates a sense of collective strength, allowing individuals to act in ways that would not be possible on their own. It also undermines the divide and conquer strategies that are so central to the success of the worst, forcing them to confront a unified opposition rather than a fragmented one. Another important strategy is to expose the contradictions and hypocrisies of those who exploit the system. The worst often rely on a carefully crafted image of competence, strength, or morality to maintain their position, but this image is rarely aligned with reality. By highlighting the gap between their rhetoric and their actions, it is possible to erode the trust and support that they depend on. This requires vigilance and persistence, as those in power will often go to great lengths to suppress dissent and control the narrative. However, history has shown that even the most entrenched systems of oppression can be challenged when their contradictions are brought to light. Education and awareness are also crucial in dismantling the systems that allow the worst to thrive. Many people are complicit in these systems not because they actively support them, but because they do not fully understand how they operate. By raising awareness of the tactics and strategies used by those in power, it is possible to empower individuals to resist manipulation and take action against injustice. This is particularly important in the age of misinformation, where the ability to critically evaluate information is more important than ever. While these strategies can be effective, they are not without risks. Challenging the worst often comes with significant personal and collective costs, as those in power will not relinquish their position without a fight. This is why resilience and perseverance are so important in the struggle for justice and equality. It is not enough to challenge the worst once. It must be a sustained effort, capable of withstanding setbacks and adapting to changing circumstances. The worst thrive because they are willing to do what others will not, but this does not mean that their dominance is inevitable. It is possible to create systems that reward integrity, collaboration, and long-term thinking rather than deception and selfishness. This requires a fundamental shift in the way power is understood and exercised, moving away from a zero-sum mentality and towards a more inclusive and equitable approach. Such a shift will not happen overnight, but it is possible through the collective efforts of individuals and communities who refuse to accept the status quo. The question of why the worst always win is ultimately a reflection of the choices and values of society as a whole. If we continue to reward deception and selfishness, we will continue to see these traits dominate. But if we choose to value integrity, collaboration, and long-term thinking, we can create a world where the best in humanity is rewarded rather than the worst. This is not an abstract ideal, but a practical necessity, as the challenges facing humanity today, climate change, inequality, political instability, require solutions that go beyond the short-term, self-serving strategies of those who currently hold power. The worst may always have the ability to win in certain contexts, but their dominance is not inevitable. By understanding the dynamics of power and acting with intelligence, integrity, and resilience, it is possible to challenge their dominance and create a world that reflects our highest aspirations rather than our basest instincts. This requires not only individual effort, but also collective action, as the systems that allow the worst to thrive are deeply entrenched and resistant to change. However, history has shown that change is possible when people come together to demand it. The worst may win in the short term, but their victories are ultimately unsustainable. True power lies in the ability to shape the world in ways that reflect the best of humanity rather than the worst.